lovely to see you all. So lovely to be here. Thanks to Kate for organising. Love the Facebook group as well, Kate. You did an amazing job with that. So thanks for all the work that you put in. I know it's really, really hard work. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Maria Harris and I am chair of the Open Property Data Association, which is a trade body, and I'll come on to that in a little bit. But this November, I will celebrate 20 years in the mortgage industry, which makes me feel absolutely ancient, because before I joined mortgages, I did 10 years working in travel and utilities, managing contact centres, and kind of fell into FS by accident, I guess, like most people in banking do. So I used to be head of mortgages for mortgage intermediaries for HBOS when we were rescued by Lloyds. Then I was head of national accounts for Lloyds. I then went and worked in the building society sector for a while, which was lovely, did some work in mutuals. And then I was asked if I would go and help set up Atom Bank. So for any of you who've used Digital Mortgages by Atom Bank, that was my baby. I got to design it and build it and launch it from scratch, which was amazing and the craziest thing that I'll probably ever do in my entire life. But I was really lucky while I was doing Atom Bank. So I don't come from a technical background at all. Everything I've done my whole life has been sales, customer service, managing people, managing teams. But because we were doing the Atom Bank thing and designing digital and the first app-only bank from scratch, I got invited to all sorts of fantastic projects like Land Registry Digital Street, Open Banking Implementation, and the Home Buying and Selling Council, which is a government industry collaboration group who were set up to try and improve the home buying process. So 4 years ago, the Home Buying and Selling Council asked me if I could look at upfront information and could I digitise it in the same way that I'd done with Atom Bank. And of course, in my complete naivety, I was like, yes, of course you can, because all of this technology and stuff already exists. And yes, we can make this work. And I've spent the last 4 years trying to realise all the reasons that it hadn't been done before and how absolutely horrendously difficult it is and all the things that we need to make it happen, a lot of which have actually come to fruition this year. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. So I'm going to do a bit of an update about where we are with the legislation that we need, different government announcements that have come out, what smart data is and why it's important for mortgages and for home buying. So Open Property Data Association is a trade body. Like I said, I've been working on this for 4 years, but OPDA launched 2 years ago when we got to a point where we realised, A, this is really happening, B, the work that we were doing was making a difference, and that we needed a kind of legal entity, a legal structure to actually be custodians of a lot of the work that we've done. So don't worry if you haven't heard from us. We've only been around 2 years and we're still relatively new. Mortgage Advice Bureau are one of our first mortgage networks to sign up. So they've been on for a few months now, and London and Country just joined us recently, which is great. So we've got a good broker kind of voice in the room, which is always a good thing. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is where we are with the government mission. So I'm sure you all saw all of this stuff in the manifesto around pledges to kickstart economic growth, and that our position within the G7 needs to be maintained, because there's a lot of the tables where we've actually dropped behind, and there's a lot of the technology stuff where the UK used to be a leader and we're kind of not leading anymore, and it's really important for our global position and for GDP and stuff, and I'll talk about that in a bit as well, about the impact on the economy. Lots of work around energy, some of which was driven by the cost of living crisis, but also around all of the climate change risks and everything else. And to make that happen, we actually need some really good data. And there's a lot of stuff around our properties that we don't know, stuff around the police and taking back streets, breaking down barriers to education and for people to be able to move easily and find opportunities and move for work and all of that stuff that's also really hard right now. And the fixing of the NHS again, which actually relies a lot on smart data. So some really important kind of government mission statements, a lot of which actually rely on technology to get them done. So one of the pieces of legislation that passed recently actually underpins a lot of that work that needs to be done, and that legislation is the Data Use and Access Act. So it was the Data Use and Access Bill. Before that, it was the Smart Data and Something Else Bill. It's the third time we tried to get it through Parliament, and every time we got really, really close to getting it signed off, something huge happened, like a general election was called, or we had a change of government or whatever. So this time it has been passed, which is absolutely amazing. So it had its royal assent on the 19th of June, and so that means it's now actual legislation and law. There will be a detailed plan later this year, which starts with cutting NHS waiting times, cutting all of the NHS bureaucracy around having to give your data multiple times when you're in one process. So being able to share your health records, a lot of stuff around police bureaucracy, and then being able to share records between each other. And like I say, a lot of that relies on actual data and data structure. But a lot of the turbocharging of innovation and tech includes the property market. So I'll come on and talk about the Smart Data Challenge shortly, but Smart Data essentially is starting with the transition of open banking to open finance. So things like mortgages, savings accounts, pensions, investments, all the stuff that didn't get delivered by the open banking implementation back in 2018. The NHS Health Service data, open energy data, and open property data. And the legislation also underpins things like reusable digital identity, which is one of the things that we've been asking for a long time. So at the moment, we have a digital identity scheme, which is legislated for. There are companies who are accredited to collect and share digital identity data, but the only use cases for it today are to prove that you have right to rent or right to work, or to prove your age for buying restricted goods, or for things like DBS checks. It doesn't really work where you want to share your identity with 4 or 5 different people as part of one transaction, as in estate agent, mortgage intermediary, mortgage lender, and conveyancer. So the new legislation underpins being able to share your identity with multiple people, and also using it to a higher standard, which we need for the property market. So the new law's in place, it enables a whole bunch of use cases, and it also covers that digital verification and trust tools so that consumers can prove who they are and share that with confidence. And the ICO will be replaced with a new data regulator, and those 7 new NEDs are being recruited now. I think the closing date's actually the end of this month, so the new Information Commission will run all of the plans for that act and make sure that everything's being delivered. So legislation which is fab. If you've got any questions while we're going through that pop into your head, feel free to stick them in the chat, but I will do a proper Q&A session and a discussion at the end on answering anything you want. And I promise there's no daft questions. A lot of this is quite technical. So smart data, which I said I'd come through. So this data use and access bill has been estimated that if we get the data bit of this right and create a smart data economy for things like energy, property, identity, etc., that will generate around 10 billion towards the UK economy. And that's around enabling data sharing, and there's a whole host of like benefits for consumers and businesses. So if you think about the property market and how much of the transaction is currently done sharing documents and random bits of paper, whether that's bank statements, somebody's proof of address, getting the title, getting the deeds, getting the searches, all of the things that are hugely inefficient about the process, data actually unlocks that, because once we turn it into smart data and make it safe and secure for customers to access and to share with you and with everybody else in the process, a lot of that inefficiency goes away. So we get this huge kind of efficiency uplift and productivity uplift. But in the same way that open banking did for fintech, having open property data will do the same for prop tech and reg tech and legal tech. So it will enable a lot of startups who've got really good ideas and really good propositions to be able to automate services or to provide really good services for consumers, personalized switching, market comparisons, a whole bunch of stuff that will just take lots of cost and kind of inefficiency and time out of the process. So 10 billion overall for smart data schemes, but we think that a decent chunk of that will actually be improvements in the property market. So a smart data ecosystem needs to be interoperable across sectors. So that just means that if you're a consumer, the way that you access and share your property data should be the same as the way that you access and share your health data, as in it should have the same protocols, the same security, the same level of trust attached. So there are some things that need to be common across all of those different schemes. But like I say, it unlocks a whole load of opportunity and solves loads of problems, not least for government. If you think about how inefficient the mortgage industry is, or the home buying industry, government and local authority have the same challenges in that every time we request searches, somebody has to go and get it and provide it and then share it and check it and all of those kind of stuff. So a huge amount of stuff to unlock. So the Smart Data Challenge Prize is being run by the Department of Business and Trade, and that was to encourage ideas across financial services, energy, retail, transport and home buying. On the back of all of those announcements, the government then announced their modern industrial strategy, so that just came out a few weeks ago, which confirmed that smart data is now officially part of the 10-year industrial strategy. It's actually the cornerstone of future economic growth, and it underpins that government manifesto on making sure that the UK is a really easy place to do business and that we have a well-functioning, easy to access and easy to use market. So, we know that buying a home is not the easiest process to go through, and there's lots of knock-on effects of that in terms of GDP. So on the industrial strategy, the government have committed 36 million to fund those smart data schemes. So that'll support better services, business stability, efficiency, competition, and that includes property. Smart data will be expanded from the current open banking framework to cover open finance. So I say that will include mortgages, savings, pensions, investments, credit cards, a whole bunch of other stuff, but also smart data for energy, property, transport, and digital markets. So property is one of the first 5 use cases being delivered by the Department of Business and Trade. We'll have a new national data sharing framework, and that'll be delivered next year. So that's that common approach to things like governance, trust, security, and making sure that the schemes that we build are interoperable so that they work in the same way. And then there's 150 million on top of the 36 that's being committed for professional and business services. But they've said that one of their first use cases is also the property sector ecosystem. So that's to enable that prop tech, law tech, AI, all of the things that need data to work really well. And that's being delivered through a CFIT coalition. So we're OPD are included in that, but we have the British Property Federation, UK PropTech Association, etc. So there's a whole bunch of people feeding into that CFIT. But those 4 points on the modern industrial strategy are all being delivered by the Department of Business and Trade. So we have the Department of Business and Trade Smart Data Council, which I sit on for OPDA, and we have a whole bunch of other people in there, including the regulator, the ICO, which, that kind of stuff, and then a lot of the trade associations, to make sure that all of those schemes are being really well thought through and that we're doing the right things to make sure we've got the right foundations in place. So that's the Department of Business and Trade stuff. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term smart data just means that the data that's held at source, so for example, land registry, is taken out of documents and turned into actual data in a standard format, and the same format that all of the people who need the data then adopt, and that data can be accessed and shared by systems without someone having to go in and rekey or manually check it. So if you're getting your land registry title and deed, you should be able to see in your system the unique property reference number, the title number, the address, and how many years are left on the lease, as an example. And every system who accesses that should access it in exactly the same way and get that data back in exactly the same structure. So that everybody's got one version of the truth, which came from the actual source, that all of that data can flow between systems without manual intervention, but also then so that we all know that we're actually all talking about the same property because we've all got the same data at the same time in real time. So that means that you'll never have a situation again where you are having to physically go through the deed to find out how many years are left on the lease, or you don't find out 6 weeks after offer that the conveyancer's got a copy of the lease and you thought it was 85 years, but the conveyancer's like, no, it's actually 65, and therefore your offer's no longer valid and you have to go and do something again and find a new lender or wait for the current owner to get the lease extended. All of that kind of inefficiency goes away because the data is trusted and secure right at the beginning, and it's shareable in a really easy to use format that machines use today. We talk about all of this stuff as if it's new. All of this has been around since 2020, since we had standards for the internet. So all of this has been really common in other industries for like 25 years. So if you think about how we do a lot of stuff today on our smartphones, like use Uber or, order a taxi, order takeaway, and book hotels, anything that you search on the internet, all of those stuff are actually underpinned by these standards already. And the trust framework was first delivered as part of open banking, and the UK delivered that in 2016, went live 2018, and that was actually the first trust framework in the world. And what's happened since then is that other countries have gone on and taken that trust framework kind of principle and applied it to other smart data. So you've got Brazil have just launched their open finance. They stood that whole thing up in 6 months, and it cost about 2 million quid. And all of their open finance data is now in the hands of their the person whose bank account it is, and can be really easily shared with people who need it. But it underpins a whole bunch of other stuff as well around logistics and things like food quality. Like you can track where your avocado came from and which actual farm it was in South America and all of the different ports it's been through. Same for diamonds. It kind of, you can do all of the provenance of the data and prove immutable trust back to the source. So that trust framework standard's been around for about 7 years now as well. So none of this is new. We're just applying it to all of the other things that need it now. So on top of the Department of Business and Trade, obviously the housing policy and all of the work that I need actually sits with MHCLG. So on the back of the legislation being presented to House of Commons and House of Lords, Angela Rayner came on BBC Breakfast on the 9th of February and announced that they would modernise the home buying and selling process. Like, woohoo. Waited a long time for that one. And Matthew Pennycook, who's the current housing minister, then followed that up with his own statement. So we have commitment from the government that they will digitise government and local authority data. That includes land registry, local searches, coal authority, geospatial data, etc. So there's obviously lots of data that needs to be sorted. You can imagine how much paper currently lives in the system. I kid you not, for anyone who's been following the local land charges project, where they've been digitising local authority searches, they have found underground file storages where people have paper, as in scrolls, microfiche, just everything you can possibly imagine. Laminates, does anybody remember when we used to have overhead projectors and you would have stuff on laminate that you displayed? They've literally found everything you can imagine, and they're in the process of converting that into data. So they've done about 125 local authority search councils so far, and one of the projects that's underway that MHCLG have committed to is to open up more of that data. So MHCLG work with us, and they co-chair our working group on data and trust standards, and we do that through the Digital Property Market Steering Group. So they're working really hand in hand with us on data standards, trust standards, and how we build that trust framework. All of the other trust frameworks are all kind of business led, and for the consumer, it's kind of a point-to-point relationship. Like if you collect your energy data and you want to share it with, say, a search company because you want to do a comparison, that's kind of a one-to-one relationship with somebody in the middle who's collecting and sharing the data for you. Property is really, really complicated in that our use case is the first one where the sources of data are central government, local government, and industry. And the number of people that the data needs to be shared with is multiple people on one transaction. So we've got huge amounts of complexity that none of the other trust frameworks have, which is why property is such a hot topic for government, because if we crack this for the property and mortgage market, everything else is really simple by comparison, because ours will be, I think, one of the most complicated ones that you can do. So the two projects that MHCLG committed to are funded. They are already underway. So one of those is with the local authorities to open up more of their data. And I'll share some information about that in a few weeks or a few months, once we can say who the local authorities are and what data it is that they're opening up. But that test has already started, and we've already got local authorities who've volunteered to be part of that proof of concept. And then the second one is a research project. And MHCLG have an external company who are looking at what is the role of government in data and trust standards. So should government be building this stuff? Should they be adopting the stuff that we've already designed and created? Should we be doing it together? Should they be endorsing it or doing some kind of kite mark that says, if you're using the OPDA standards and you're accredited by OPDA, actually this is completely trustable and here's your kite mark to prove it. So the research team will work through all of those different options and recommend what government role should be. That research project's only 12 weeks. It started on the 30th of June, so we'll get an answer really quickly from MHCLG on what their role is going to be and what it is that they need us to stand up and deliver and where they're going to fit into that. But we're also established on all of those protocols for verifying data, being able to prove that the data you've got from Land Registry came from Land Registry, and then knowing which third parties in the industry, so that'll include CRM providers, any of the technology that you're using today that needs data to then do decisioning or to do sourcing, etc. All of those CRM, case management systems, everything, all need to be accredited. So they're going to have they'll be signed off and approved, and they'll have secure credentials for collecting and sharing that data. So our first lot of members have been through that process through self-accreditation, but as we build out the trust framework, we'll layer on top of that. So our trust framework sandbox launches on the 1st of September, and we're doing that with support from MHCLG and Land Registry. So they're working with us on that, which is amazing. So all of these blue links that are in there, they're all of the links through to where you'll find more information on all of this stuff. So MHCLG's promise is that home buying and selling will become quicker and cheaper. We're going to modernise the process. Taking 23 weeks to move house is outrageous. As I said in the intro, I came from a very different retail background. I came from travel and then utilities and then obviously banking, where you just would not put up with this level of failure. Like, you wouldn't put up with this level of customer experience, or how hard you guys have to work to get a case through on something that actually should just flow really well. So having 3 in 10 transactions fall through is just not acceptable. The amount of time it takes to move home is not acceptable, and the level of hard work and stress and duplication and inefficiency is just like unbelievably bad. So modernising, we're going to fix all of that stuff. So I mentioned briefly the Digital Property Market Steering Group. So that was also set up in 2023 when OPDA launched. It's chaired by MHCLG. It's chaired by the Deputy Minister for Housing, which is great because that gives it the focus and the kudos that it needs in government. So the members include us, Land Registry, UK Finance, the BSA, Conveyancing Association, like lots more, all of the trade bodies and associations that you would expect to see for estate agents, right the way through to conveyancers and everyone in between. And the purpose of that group is kind of the delivery vehicle. So it's DPMSG's job to make sure that we accelerate adoption of all of this digital technology, that's our vehicle for collaboration and innovation. And that's to make sure that we've got that cross-sector agreement, all of the collaboration, everybody gets to feed into these projects as we're doing it, and that we drive and cascade that change across the whole of the industry at the same time. Because there's no point doing what we've done historically, which is the decision in principle advice process through to the lender getting the application, which intermediaries and lenders have worked really hard on. And you can do a mortgage offer in 14 seconds, and you've got this really great onboarding experience with your intermediary getting your advice into the mortgage process. But the rest of the 25 weeks or 23 weeks, whatever it is, still ends up being an absolute pain in the neck. So there's no point us doing it in isolation and picking bits of the verticals to change. We need to change it kind of horizontally. So DPMSG's job is to make sure that horizontal bit works. So if you haven't seen the DPMSG roadmap, you'll find it on their LinkedIn page. But that published roadmap is commitment from all of us to deliver an industry-wide digital protocol for property that will implement reusable digital identity, that will digitise property data across the whole of the home buying process, and that will ensure that we're interoperable across the industry and with those other schemes. So all of that is on the roadmap. It was committed to at the beginning of 2024. We published the roadmap in January last year, and then there was an update earlier this year on what progress we've made and the things that come next, including the stuff that we've done on data standards and that trust framework sandbox, which kicks off on the 1st of September. So that's all in there as well. So if you don't follow DPMSG, definitely give them a follow on LinkedIn. If you want to know a bit more about smart data and how it supports the other government priorities, there's a control shift briefing that's really helpful. It's a really easy read for people like me who are non-technical. It talks about things like net zero, what it means for people for like streamlined switching, and how it opens up new business innovation for like other sectors in the same way that we did for open banking. And it talks about some of the kind of national projects like having a national data library and the National Underground Asset Register, which are great for us because every time the government digitise a piece of data and create a standard for that we can then adopt, or we write a standard that they adopt, it makes that digitisation one step closer. So yeah, if you're interested in reading a bit more about it, then Control Shift Briefing is a really good place to look. So I mentioned Department of Business and Trade Smart Data Council. So one of the things that came out of the council was to launch a challenge, which was to find 10 use cases that we could start with using smart data. That would then kind of open up, like, what are the uses for smart data? What are the potential for this? How big of an impact could it have? And to bring to life some of the work that people like us are doing. So that was launched earlier this year. It's the Department of Business and Trade, Challenge Works, the Open Data Institute, and the Smart Data Foundry. There are 10 prototype use cases. So there's open finance, energy, retail, property, and transport. So we've got one of those. So ours is with Movely, who are one of our founding members. And they provide a digital property pack to people who are selling their property and enable that data to then be shared with the estate agent, with the conveyancer, with potential buyers, and then with the people who are representing the buyer. So mortgage intermediary, mortgage lender, valuer, and conveyancer. So Movely kind of enable that collection and sharing of the data, and OPDA are the partner for that. So obviously they're using our data standards and working with other members of OPDA to bring it to life. So DBT and Challenge Works put 600,000 in prize awards into that. So we've already got access to the Smart Data Sandbox. So we are developing that prototype now. So it's a real life application. We're going to show a real life process going through using smart data. One of the challenges for us is that we've actually been live since last year. And we've already got more than 2,000 customers who've been through the process using a digital property pack. So for some of the things that are in the Smart Data Sandbox, it's a bit of a step back to prototype when we're already operationally live. But the Smart Data Sandbox actually has a bunch of other smart data in it, which is synthetic data right now, which means it's not real, but it's real life. So it's got things like what an open mortgage would look like, as in smart data mortgage, what a smart data savings account would look like. So it means we can start pulling that data in from other sources and showing how we'd use that in the home buying process. So open finance is great for us because that's a whole bunch of processes that we can make slicker and easier. Open energy is really good for things like affordability and actually just for customer transparency. So if you're buying a home, you can start to see what kind of bills should I expect based on the size of that property, the condition of that property, what white goods or what kind of boilers are already in there, and based on historic use. And then there's things like, transport and stuff, which, can be attached to a listing and might be like information that somebody needs to know when they're looking at whether or not it's a good property for them. So we're pulling in those different kind of smart data from other industries to show how they would augment what we're doing. So the challenge is to utilise all of those multiple data sets and then demonstrate what impact that would have on consumer experience and how that benefit would be long lasting. So for property, it's obviously an absolute no-brainer. So Louise Burke, Open Data Institute's put a quote in there. So let's say this is just around getting 10 different ideas, proving how the smart data would actually be used, how it would be delivered, and then that'll underpin all of the business cases to then get that data converted in real life. So yeah, looking forward to delivering that. So that's who's running the prize. The timescales on it are really, really tight. We have to deliver our prototype by October, which given school holidays is actually like no time away at all. So we've got huge amounts of workshops going on now doing all of those different tasks that we need to do. So if anybody's interested, we will share our prototype after October, after it's been submitted. But if anybody wants to talk to any of our members about what this looks like in real life, then absolutely let me know and I'll put you in touch with the right people. So this is what's in the smart data. So there's stuff around people, let's say it's all synthetic, so it's all safe, and we don't need to worry about sharing it because it's not a real person. Details about businesses, so we can use that to mock up, this is a mortgage intermediary, this is their name, this is their business type, this is director details, so we can do lots of authentication as we're going. Consumer banking, business banking, insurance, energy, retail, property, conveyancing, land registry, and transport. So there's not much in there that we wouldn't use as part of home buying, which definitely makes our use case interesting. So I'm going to stop talking in a minute and stop sharing. So I'm sure you've had enough of listening to my voice for 5. So what does this all mean for you guys? So we know we've had any amount of government research papers, discussion papers, white papers, and we even had a Levelling Up Select inquiry that I gave evidence at last May onto like, why is the home buying process still so slow? We've had all of this technology that's kind of boomed for the last 25 years, lenders and mortgage intermediaries who've spent like billions digitizing their own platforms and connecting to each other. We've got all of this, launch of new technology that was supposed to make everything better, and actually it's much worse than it's ever been. When I joined the industry in November 2005, we used to average 12 to 13 weeks to completion, and now the average is 154 days, which I think is about 5 and a bit months. So we've gone absolutely backwards, even with all of this technology, and the customer experience is horrific, as you guys know, because you manage the customer through it. So we did, there's lots of research out there, but we did a consumer report, like a survey last year, back end of last year, and published the report this year, asking homeowners what their experience had really been like, but also asking them about what their understanding was about digital and where they thought the market was. We interviewed more than 5,300 buyers and sellers. I think it's one of the biggest surveys that's ever been done. And the report was it was really eye-opening. So people's experience was exactly what we expected, as in it was awful. They thought they'd be able to move within 3 months. The reality was most people couldn't move for almost 6. We had some really unlucky people in the Midlands who had the highest proportion of plus 6 months. But also when we asked people about how much of property data do you think is already digitized, they thought it was lots, and the answer is actually less than 1%, because the only data that's been digitized so far is that local authority search piece that local land charges have been doing. The rest of the property industry exists in paper and downloads and reports and Excel spreadsheets or Polygon databases. It's not in the format that we need it to be. So consumers' expectation about how digital we are and the reality was really far behind. But also customers really said, like, we want this to be better. We get asked for the same information multiple times. The overall experience is really bad. There's a big black hole around not really knowing what's happening. All of the things that we knew, like we know that, and it's one of the reasons that Atom Bank was set up the way it was, to be digital and to try and solve some of these, but it only solved one tiny little bit of the process, which is why we need to do the same for the rest. But consumers' attitude to digital was really, really surprising. 82% of respondents supported the idea of a digital property pack, and we had respondents from age 18 to 80 plus, and a really big proportion of respondents were over 65. So it wasn't even that it was just like people who were in their 30s saying, we would use the technology. It was across the board. 77% of home movers said they would have used a digital property pack on their transaction if one had been available, which is an enormous amount. 33%, as you'd expect, said that security of their data was the most important feature, which is why we absolutely have to have the trust framework. We have to be able to prove that the data came from where it came from, and the customer needs to consent to share that data. So that trust has to be baked in. And 1 in 4 people said that government should be leading on the digital transformation. So big push for MHCLG to say, come on, guys, people are expecting you to do this. I'd love to do this. I'd love to do this survey with the industry and see how much of the industry said the same. I think that would be an interesting one to do. So in terms of the future of the home buying process, so we're going to get rid of rekeying and checking of documents and actually free up your time to do the thing that you've trained to do, which is to give advice and to talk to your consumers and find out what their homes and their aspirations and their dreams and what it is that they actually want from their home and their kind of property purchase, and stop you doing all of the stuff that I'm sure you didn't spend all of your CMAP 3 getting trained to look at bank statements and find things that are wrong. We'll have streamlined one-time ID, so the customer will do their identity check once, and then that will be shared with the people who need it with the right level of trust and provenance attached. All of the data will come from trusted sources. So given that we've got very little of our data which is digital today, that's why we need to accredit the third parties who are being the proxy for that data. So we'll always have third parties who are collecting and sharing that data in the same way that we do with open banking today. So if you make a payment between one bank and another, you'll maybe use someone like TrueLayer who provide that bit in the middle. So TrueLayer just provide a service today because the data is digitized at both ends. At the moment, our third parties who are doing that are not only having to provide the mechanism for sharing, but they're also having to prove where the data came from, and they're having to supply the trust to stand behind it. And we're going to have that for quite a long time. It's going to take us, I don't even want to guess how many years, to digitize all of those data sources and turn them from paper and microfiche into something that's machine readable. better focus on core work and all the value add tasks, better capacity and efficiency. And as you know, our housing market goes from 800 transactions a year to 1.2 million to 900 to 1.1 million. And it's really hard to flex capacity around that because it's so inefficient. So actually it'll make it easier to deal with those peaks and troughs and actually free up time for us to do stuff that's way more interesting. But overall, better customer experience, better user experience, a better industry profile. Like, it'll actually just turn the whole process of buying a house on its head. It means that all of the data will be available upfront at the beginning of the process for everyone who needs it. One source of the truth, everybody having the same data in real time and at the right time. And the people who've done this on our membership, and some of those 2,000 customers who've been through the process already, have been able to exchange contracts in 15 days instead of 23 weeks. The transparency and the confidence and the customer experience on the back of that is night and day. It's absolutely just unbelievably different. But for all of the people who are servicing that customer, they have a much better experience as well, because they're not playing, chase the update, who's got the baton, what's outstanding, and having to do all of those things that are just, soul destroying and numbingly boring. So smart property data is all about digitizing the data it stores, having common standards across data and trust frameworks, having governance, verification, trust and security built in right from the very beginning, safe and secure consented data sharing across all parties, and it puts customers in control. So the consumer knows how to access their data, how to share it, improve their experience, have more control over their experience, but it puts the customer at the absolute heart of the transaction. And that's what the smart data legislation is there to deliver. So we're going to deliver the property aspect. Apologies, that was like 40-minute whistle stop tour of 4 years worth of work.
It's okay. It was really interesting. I mean, 15 days would be insane. It would just free up so much of the time we spend like just chasing people.
And the scariest bit of that, Kate, is that actually that should be the norm. There is no reason that, other than new builds or where you've genuinely got like a legal issue that needs to be resolved, there is nothing to stop the majority of people exchanging contracts in 15 days. That doesn't mean people need to move in 2 weeks. Like, people can choose to move when they want. Robert Sinclair keeps reminding me, like, he would need 3 months' notice to clear out his shed and his loft and clear out, 50 years of detritus. But consumers should have the confidence that contracts are being exchanged. I can set my moving date. I know what I'm working to, and I know it's not going to fall through and that nothing's going to go wrong at the last minute. So people get very fixated on the speed. It's not actually about speed. It's about the customer process being easier and transparency.
And from our perspective, if they've exchanged in 15 days, we're done, right? That's it. We're done. We can move on. Like, we don't have to chase the solicitors to see how they're getting on constantly and get emails from clients not understanding solicitors' communications and having to decipher what the solicitors are trying to tell them because they don't understand, because the conveyancers only talk in legal jargon most of the time that doesn't make sense to the consumer. It would just get rid of so much of that we seem to be involved in a lot more and more. Actually, like you said, I know the timescales have massively increased, which they have, but we also seem to just have to be involved in this legal process so much more than we ever used to be. Because consumers are really struggling to understand it, so they really so that would just speed up so much time. I'm guessing it would reduce fraud as well, right? It's going to reduce fraud massively.
So Norway is a really good example of this, and places like Holland, where they have digitized their land registries already and actually make this data free and shareable, but where they have things like reusable digital identity, they have zero fraud in the home buying and mortgage process. So one of the things that we're doing in the sandbox is not just the reusable digital identity, but we're using the other smart data to show actually we should be able to do the ID, anti-money laundering, KYC and proof of funds check all at the beginning. It should be done to this level because that's the highest level that you need to get through the process. So if there's any fraud, it gets kicked out at the very beginning before MD even gets into the process. And that's one of the things that we're testing in the Smart Data Sandbox to do exactly that. So we need to write what the standards will be. There's already a digital identity and attributes trust framework, and that's run by the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology. And we're working with them through Digital Property Market Steering Group to say, those standards are great and that's a really good foundational level, but actually because property is so complicated, we need a supplementary scheme that sits on top of that, and we need to write the standards for that to say what would that supplementary scheme need to achieve, and how do we take the consumer through that journey to say, here's your ID check, and you get your ID check from here. And the government have even launched their own digital identity wallet so that you can authenticate your driving license and your passport. But how do you then use that ID to then check your anti-money laundering, to link it to your bank, to link it to your KYC, and link it to your proof of funds, so that the lender and the conveyancer know that those checks have all been done right to the right level. So yeah, I mean, don't get us wrong, I'm not saying that we're going to eradicate fraud, because fraudsters are much more clever than I'll ever be, but there's huge amounts of that we can take out of the process, but catch right at the very beginning before everybody goes down that painful bit.
Would just save so much time, wouldn't it? Beverly, I think, do you have a question?
Fair enough. Hi Maria, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm great, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. So lovely to hear a Geordie accent. Where's the biggest resistance coming from, out of interest, Maria? Where's the push all the time?
That's a great question. Okay, so given that I come from a mortgage industry and ran mortgage intermediary for 15 years, that was kind of an open door, because it's the one bit of the industry that I know and love and have worked in for a really long time. Estate agents kind of have no choice, because Trading Standards issued the guidance on material information 2 years ago. They were given a year to embed it, and that's now been taken on by the CMA, and the CMA have been really clear about the sanctions. So it was absolutely brilliant to see all the stuff about conditional selling last week, and all of the huge response from the industry to go, this needs to stop, it's not acceptable. So estate agents kind of don't have a choice. Lots of technology firms who have been with me on this journey for the last 4 years are absolutely committed to getting it done, so that's great. The bit that I really struggle with, though, and I'm not saying anything tells out of school, because I said this at my Levelling Up Select inquiry, is conveyancing. Some of the legal, anybody who follows me on LinkedIn will know, anytime I post anything about digitisation, I get shot down by the Property Lawyers Action Group, or whatever they're calling themselves these days. And there are some things like the Law Society's TA6, TA7, TA10 forms, which are forms, like as in paper forms, that they have intellectual property rights over, and they're licensed to their members. So getting them to change and adopt digital means that they have to completely rethink their commercial model and how they work with their members. And I'm a bit like, that's not really my problem. Like, this is now legislation, and DPMSG have committed to getting this done, which includes Law Society, and MHCLG are going to come out with a statement on whether or not, like, do we need to mandate this? Is that the only way we're going to get the industry to do it? So the whole conveyancing legal professional, and we've got some amazing conveyancers who are members and who are absolutely working on it, including people like Simply, PEXA, Movera, LMS, who are one of our founding members, as our PEXA. So we've got some of the legal professional, absolutely, but we've got some who are just incredibly resistant. But we also have some technology firms, and some of them are some of the biggest in the industry, who do really, really well out of the process being bad. Because they are providing the same service multiple times during one transaction. If that falls through and your valuation or survey can't be reused by the other party, and then the valuer goes out and does it again, the system who instructs that gets paid again. So there's lots of practice that actually needs breaking down. So some of the tech companies are a bit like, but this absolutely destroys our shareholder value, and I'm a bit like, well, you're going to end up being Blockbuster because this is happening. So yeah, there's some people who really need to think their business model and rethink their commercial agreements. But even stuff like identity providers, or credit checks, lenders pay for those things to be done. Predominantly, they're usually the main source of income for those firms, and what a lender pays for a digital identity check to be done compared to what a customer will actually pay are very different. And if you're one of the providers of things like credit bureau information, money laundering information, whatsoever, you're getting paid to do that check 2 or 3 times during the process, whereas under the new legislation, the consumer will request the check once, and the consumer will share it with each party. So you're going to go from getting paid for doing that 3-4 times to getting paid once. So yeah, lots of resistance.
Yeah.
I feel for you. I'm so glad you're doing this. So my final question then, I'm going to retire in a few years, Maria. Will I see this in my working lifetime, please? Because I'm sitting here resubmitted going, why are we doing all this?
Oh, well, like I said, I mean, I joined Atom Bank right at the very beginning. I was employee number 7. So I joined Atom in 2014, thinking that that was the thing that was going to change the world. And, 5 years after Atom launched, when I left to go and set up my own consultancy, and I was so disappointed that Atom Bank is like the most amazing thing and doing 14-second mortgage offers, fabulous. And my consumer still had an absolutely horrendous rest of the journey, and I
Yeah.
didn't feel like I could influence that. So this is the way that I can influence it. When will we have it done? If I was a betting woman, given that MHCLG's 2 projects are already live, however, we just had a spending review where they all had to submit cuts. So we're not going to be able to go back and request budget until the 27 start of financial year. So I think we'll see the first fully digitised end to end by the end of 2028. So I think we'll see the first fully digital one in 3 years' time.
I'll hang on then. Thank you, Maria. If I can. Thank you, Maria. Brilliant presentation, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be revolutionary, right? It's going to change the way we all do business. Because the open banking, let's be honest, it didn't really do what it was like. Lots of customers haven't adopted it, and especially from in the mortgage industry anyway, we haven't really seen it. Kind of lenders haven't really adopted it. Much to do. So it'd be nice to actually see this actually being pushed through. I can see why there's resistance from the conveyancing side, though. To be honest, they're not the most modern society, are they? Of individuals generally.
There's just such extremes, isn't there? There's like some who are really modern and really into digital and absolutely get it, and then there are some who are like, no, I like my snail mail and my fax machines, and I'm like, this is not secure. It's not GDPR compliant.
No. I mean, and there's still a campaign to try and get them to stop using Dear Sirs, which they haven't managed to do yet either. So there's some of them that are definitely quite far behind the times.
And open banking thing, I mean, it's amazing. Like the number of transactions that go through our open banking is like huge. It's really, really huge. But it's that customers don't recognise that is open banking. No. So MD who's using it to make payments from their bank account to any third party, or paying your credit card from your current account when it's with different providers, all of that's open banking, but customers just don't recognise it as open banking. But one of the biggest learns from the open banking implementation was that just doing it on current account probably wasn't the best use case or the most. They did it because that's the most transactional bit of the account, but actually you're right, in terms of value, had we started with mortgages, savings and current accounts in the way that other countries have, we might have seen more benefit from it. But also it never should have been called open banking, because customers just don't understand that open banking doesn't mean what they think it means. Open just means it's underpinned by an open standard. It's actually smart banking, and had we called it smart banking, people would probably use it a lot more. But yes, once we start opening up the savings data and the mortgages data, I think we'll see the use of that data in intermediary advice, also in mortgage lending, skyrocket, because it's not very usable today. Like you get the current account data, and unless you can get all of the current accounts from all of the different providers, and most people have more than one, it's not really usable. And if you can't get the other banking data, it's kind of like that. What's the point?
Yeah, definitely. And I think from our perspective, though, the property information will be really great to have, because it's really, sometimes it's impossible to find that information at times, because it's just like you said, it just doesn't really exist anywhere other than a paper document somewhere in a council. So having access to the property data would be completely different, wouldn't it? So it's going to change. Like you said, it's going to stop those ones that get delayed and then kicked out once it gets to legal and all those documents are finally sent over. It's going to make a huge difference. So
it'll change the advice conversation, because the buyer's going to come to you and go, I've got this digital property pack, I've got all of this information about the property, what do I do with it? And you're going to go, well, let's walk through it, and you'll be able to talk to them about what those things actually mean for them in terms of being able to get a mortgage, what kind of lender would be right for them based on that property type, not just on them as an individual. But it means that your advice is going to be so much more robust, because if you know that you've got the land registry data that says this is definitely freehold or it's definitely leasehold and there's 85 years left on the lease, you'll be able to give your consumer advice to go, look, this is not a problem now, but if you want to sell this house in 5 years, that lease is not going to, you need to think about this now, and this is going to probably you need to think about this much if you want to then buy the freehold or extend the lease to 999 years or whatever it is. It'll really strengthen the advice process. And that's such an important bit of this. And it's the reason that MAB and London and Country have joined, because one of the potential risks of having all of the data up front is that you could get to a point where you could actually streamline the whole thing and automate it completely, but we don't want to lose the value of the advice in there. So we need to be able to use the property as well as the information from the consumer to flag, you really need advice on this for this reason. Here's how you go and find that advice. But also when that advisor's going through that data, that they can use that data to add real value, because consumers will still need all of this stuff explained to them, and there'll be jargon in there that they don't understand, or implications that they would never know would be implications. So the value of advice should actually get stronger if we do this right.
Yeah, totally. It sounds, 100%. I think that's the case, isn't it? You know, consumers don't really understand it. You know, I had a client recently that just didn't grasp that they were buying share of freehold, but there was still a lease, and they just couldn't grasp why there was still a lease.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, there is still a lease. So it was, you know, they don't grasp these differences. And I think it is really important from our side to have that information up front, because I know the estate agents have the change of the rule, didn't it? It came in that they have to have more property information up front than they used to, but so many of them are still not really following that well. So it's, even though they're supposed to be. I'm surprised you're not getting more pushback from estate agents, to be honest, because
so we have On the Market, we're one of our founding members, and they really want this to be right, because why would you want your listing to not have the right information and then transaction to fall through? Because it's a huge waste of time and effort for the estate agent, and the quicker it gets sold, the quicker they get paid. So you can imagine their cash flow. I mean, you guys know what it's like from an intermediary perspective. It takes so long to get to completion now. So if you're lucky and you get paid on exchange, great. But even now, exchanges are taking like 5 months. So you can imagine for estate agents, it's an absolute killer not having that. But yes, the CMA have now been given the powers to do that enforcement in a way that, I mean, trading standards rolled out material information, but I mean, trading standards isn't that big, especially on the property side. So their ability to enforce was always going to be difficult, whereas the CMA absolutely have teeth to do that. If we're finding examples where estate agents are not including information that ended up actually having a real impact, like your leasehold example, where there's a cost to the consumer of not knowing that, or actually means that they can't get the mortgage, or they can't get a mortgage that would have been the price they could have got otherwise, then the CMA are going to start being all over that.
Yeah, good. I think they need it, don't they? Because I think the estate agents are very good at some of them are very good at taking stuff on with no real plan on how they're actually going to sell it. So it'd be good to see some of that start to stop, and actually this stuff will make it so much easier when it rolls out as well, won't it? Just across the board. I think, like you said, I think everyone just having the same information would just be a game changer from us all knowing the same stuff at the beginning.
Well, it'll be the first time in 100 years that we've changed how houses are bought and sold. It's literally not changed for like over a century. So it'll be seismic. This will be our Uber woman.
Lovely, great. Thanks so much, Maria. That was really helpful. Before we jump off, does anyone else have any other questions? I'm assuming not. There's no other hands up. No.
Well, if people do think of questions afterwards, or let's say if you can't access the PDF in the chat, or if there's something that comes after you and you think, oh, I wished I'd asked that, drop me an email, contact@openprop or openpropdata.org.uk, or find me on LinkedIn. If you go to my LinkedIn profile and press contact info, my email address and my telephone number are in there, so feel free to WhatsApp or whatever, or Kate's got my details.
Lovely. Thanks so much, Maria. That was such good information to be shared, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that it comes through. The next 3 years fly by.
Maybe next year I'll come back and do you an update.
Yeah, that would be great.
All right, have a great rest of the week, everyone. Enjoy. Take care.
Bye.